Thanks, everybody. So this is the part that nominally I'm going to be speaking, but I'm hoping to do a fraction of the speaking that's required in the next 45 minutes. And I'll explain exactly why in just a minute. Thank you as well for participating in the feedback answering the questions that we set yesterday. Dave yesterday explained we were trying to get the answer to a handful of questions, and we've got some, they were in the back of this room towards the lifts and the stairs down. We got some brilliant responses, but as with every response, the responses themselves invite a number of questions, and I intend to ask you the questions and hope that they are answered in the next session. Why are we running this particular session? I'm not a part of the management committee. I don't work for one of the organisations that's hosting NetUK today, but I care enormously about this community, and I have a fundamental belief that as we seek to build something for the future, the answer for what the community should build together is actually in this room. But I also have a fundamental belief that the people that are best placed to answer that question may not be people who feel most comfortable approaching a microphone and offering their opinion, which is why we asked some questions and allowed them to be answered anonymously via post-it notes or direct response via contacts in the industry that they know through Slack or email. The seed answers to the questions don't need to be attached to a person. You've been able to say exactly what you want with respect to questions about this organisation's futures and goal and the purpose for what we're going to do now when we sort those answers is to, once we've sought clarity on the answers, once we've sought confirmation that that's what the community believes with support, agreement to those answers or challenge to those answers, we can then establish a set of guiding principle North Stars for the management committee that do work on NetUK to take away, and the community's red lines which should not be crossed from a work, activity, governance, etc. point of view. So that when the management committee take away this piece of work that we're going to do over the next 45 minutes, an understanding of what the community's purpose and the community's needs and hopes and expectations really, really are. So the questions again, which I'll run through really, really quickly. What's going to encourage you to promote this to your peers? By this I mean peers within the industry, not necessarily or not exclusively BGP peers. Who's missing from today? We get a lot of insight into what who we think. We get a lot of insight into what we think about this community if we can answer the question for who we think is missing. What could inhibit you from showing up in the future, coupled with how might this organisation fail? That tells people looking at this what not to do. What kind of commercial collaborations would make NetUK a model for sponsorship? That tells us really, asking a question in that way hopefully helps us think carefully about how we can create funding sources which are more sustainable and more relevant to people in the community. And what do people expect to see a few years from now when the meeting series is much older? So that said, that's what we're doing now. That's the questions that got us to this point so far. Let's quickly go through the responses to each of these questions, and then I'll ask you to come to the mic and help me sort an understanding for these answers. Question one was, what would encourage you to promote the NetUK community to your peers? And we got some great answers, being present, maintaining the community for the long haul, not just running events once a year, content as the guiding, or great content being a real reason to come and advocate for the community, a welcoming and inclusive environment, opportunity, again, talks from someone's got worse writing than me, various Gregs. There are lots of people who are welcome, Gregs or otherwise, but various parts of the community, I assume it means areas, thank you, from Gregs or otherwise. Transparency. Then this note got added to further, which I thought was really, really, really interesting. Transparency when coupled with accountability. Networking opportunities, because you never know where your next role is going to come from. And I thought that was really interesting. The themes of the answers, therefore, were the community being present in our industry, creating opportunity for the people that are showing up, providing value, the content, sharing the best content, transparency and accountability. And I've got a couple of questions there for the room to start as well. First of all, before I dig into the questions on the bottom of the slide, do those answers resonate with the people in the room, or did anyone look back over those answers and think, no, that's not right? I could see a little bit of nodding, but is there anybody willing to come to a mic and say, yes, they resonate and they're complete and they are worthwhile? And right, I can see some nodding, but it's going to be a very dry 45 minutes if I just get nodding. Okay, let me ask potentially an easier question. Opportunity came up as a suggestion that's really important. What opportunities need to originate? What opportunities are people looking for through participation with the NetUK community that can only be gathered from coming together? Or I can see some movement at the back. Great.
Hello, it's Will from Lineup. I think the opportunities are, we think about this sense of community, and we realise that when we build the internet, we have to work together and as a community, and so this room actually mirrors that, what we're building together. In many other industries, there wouldn't be a gathering like this because, yeah, if we're all selling vacuum cleaner bags, then why do we need to talk to each other? But it's super important that we talk together as a community because together we are building the internet. It's not something that we're competing with each other to build, although we are competing with each other. It's in particular, it doesn't exist unless we work together. So I feel it's important that the internet is built using meetings like this. Yep. And that's why it's very important that the UK has this meeting, and it's a great meeting that people want to come to. Perhaps not answering the question, but that's a big part of my motivation for why I'm a big fan of industry meetings like this.
It doesn't exist unless we work together is potentially one of the North Stars for this. One of the reasons that it's so important that this meeting takes place is that it doesn't exist unless we come together. That's a really so it points to the criticality of what we're doing. It's not just important; it's critical. Does anybody in the room want to support that statement or challenge that statement? It's a Fergus, please.
I support it.
Fergus supports. Thank you. So, in the event that it doesn't exist unless we come together, it's critical, and I could see some nodding. That I guess points completely to why. There was a post-it note that talked about transparency being important, that was added to about accountability. What does the community expect from its leaders, the management committee, and people that we might choose in the future to coordinate these efforts? What does accountability and transparency mean to this room, for this critical organisation, or this critical community, this critical event that builds the internet that doesn't exist unless we come together? What does accountability mean?
I was hoping someone else was going to step up, so this isn't just an Andy and Will show. But I think it's really important that we have well-run meetings, that people feel like this is sort of the framework of event operations, which is kind of hard work and it's often ignored. We want to build inclusive meetings that people want to come to, that attract the right people and all of this good stuff, and that requires actual work to build that community. And I think people want to the event leaders to be accountable for achieving that. That's what people want to see. Unfortunately, it doesn't mean they want to do it themselves. But that's my view of this line.
Well, please.
Hi, Fergus Mackay again. And I think something that's important is that we need a new generation to come through, because those of us who've been running meetings for on and off for maybe the last 20, 30 years are getting to the stage of retiring or worse. And there's a don't joke. We lost Eric Bass, the day after the Wright meeting. We lost people the week before that. And it's not going to be a case of we'll suddenly find we don't have a critical part of our community. The XKCD cartoon of, this huge infrastructure and a tiny little thing written by a guy in Nebraska. In a lot of ways, we are very close to that situation. So it does involve people learning to step up and become part of a support organization so that these things can happen. If we all help, there's a lot less work than if we have 3 or 4 people doing it. Dave P. has been running around since April, or before April, to get this together, and he has a day job or 2. And we need to have a process for people to come in and help, because you can't, people can't just step up and say, "What do you want me to do?" if we don't have a structure for them.
The structure, then, yes, that's pointing, I guess, to the criticality requires a structure as well as the transparency and accountability, and that's a very good point as well.
And it's a process of how do I volunteer? Well, you can start by running mics at the meeting, and that's the first thing you do, perhaps, or perhaps you don't want to do that because that means running around, or sitting at the front desk. I used to spend a lot of UK North meetings on the front desk, greeting people, being there as the face for arrivals, and as long as you can be personable, it's something anybody can start off with doing. You don't need to be on a program committee to make a big difference to people joining. And the other thing I'd say is, being on a program committee, we want beginners as well as subject matter experts, because the content has to be for everyone. There's no point in having lots of high-level content and new engineers coming in and going, "Yeah, but this is all over my head." We want content for all. And I think that's it for now.
Okay. Mike?
Hi, Mike Hughes. The corollary of what Fergus just said about people getting older is, and new people needing to step up, is the old hands need to therefore, I think, learn to step back as well. Otherwise, people don't challenge the status quo. If people are happy with the status quo, then people won't do anything. They won't get involved. They'll go, "Well, I'm happy with how it is, and I don't have the time," or whatever. And that, I think, is the important thing, to make sure that we're inviting new people to get involved. The second thing is relating to what he said about Dave P. running around with running this event. Ask for help. In future, I understand that this needed to be put together, but ask for help. I've not seen any asks for help. And then if I come back to your point there, the one I wanted to talk about was providing value. And this was something that we struggled with in UK North.
I've got a specific question on value in the next section.
Can I just make this point before you move on? It was really hard to get people's bosses to understand the value of allowing people to come here. Audience participation moment. Who here made their own decision to come here and didn't have to ask anybody, didn't have to say, "Can I get budget?" Didn't have to say, "Can I have the day out of the office?" Just literally went, "I am going to NetUK," done. And it was a done deal. And hands up if you had to ask and get permission. Okay, so it's about 70-30, something like that, I would say. Okay. So actually, this community is currently self-selecting by the fact it is dominated by people who don't have to ask for permission, who don't have to ask for travel budget, who don't have to ask for money. And I think that is a really important point. What could inhibit you from attending? Yeah, thank you, Andy. Cheers.
And that was the guiding set of replies about what can inhibit people from attending, and a key undefined value, i.e. not cost. I've got some questions about that, which is why I've pushed on. Because it's a very, very relevant question. It's great that somebody said we need to define value and think about how much value do we need to create. We know that the NetUK management organisation spent 80k on room and the hard things that we can touch here, but actually I looked at the average salary for senior network engineers on IT Jobs Watch, looked at the day rate that generates, multiplied by that, so I had 2 days, multiplied by that by 200 people, and that means that industry has spent another 100 grand, 120,000 quid on us participating. Coupled with the amount of money we've spent on trains, hotels, etc. What is the thing we've done that's generated the £250,000 quid that got spent by industry on the conversations we've had today? Is an interesting thought experiment because that's what we're expecting, that the amount of value that needs to be created each time we come together to break even. The people who did ask someone else if they could attend, would somebody be willing to come to the microphone and say what they asked for, what they said they would get from participation? Because I think that's if someone's willing to say that and record that on behalf of the committee that will take this away and understand what needs to be done, is someone willing to say what they said the value would be? Maybe while you think about that, we can take the comments in the room.
Hi, yes, it's Tim Chown. It's a point to the last slide. I was walking up as you changed it. I think there's a question here about what you mean by community. There was an implication that it's this meeting and coming here and attending and why people are attending. But I think it should be broader than that. One of the things we learned at JISC from the annual meeting we have with our members from universities, 160 universities, several hundred colleges, is when COVID happened, we previously just had an in-person meeting and we switched it to all online. We suddenly got a huge amount of extra attendees from the colleges with the very small network teams. The thing we learned from that, and we now keep it partly online, is that they don't really have the time to send people away for a couple of days or to come to an event like this or ours, which is a 3-day thing. So I think we should be very mindful in community that there are people that are probably interested in the content, would participate online, and that may be a hook into them perhaps coming in person in the future. And I think that online side of the community is a very important one. I don't know how many people are watching the stream today compared to the number of people in the room. But I would just encourage the community, the management, whoever, to put a good amount of emphasis on the online experience as part of the community and what happens maybe also between the meetings.
That was, I think, an interesting point about community. There's a set of work that needs to be done between the meetings because that drives the online engagement that hopefully feeds attendance, the meetings going forward. That's a good bit of input, Tim. Thank you. Jesse, you were next. Ben was next, and David, I think, wasn't it? After that.
So I think some of my comments were covered already, but I wanted to build on what Will said, which is the importance of the cooperation that occurs in this community. And as a happy little associate professor that incorporates what I've learned about these communities into what I teach, when I teach them this, when I discuss what happens in these communities, the level of cooperation, the level of what Will was called, what I'm extrapolating from Will was saying was co-opetition. I get looks of incredulity. I get looks of that doesn't exist in a market economy. So one of the obligations, one of the elements of accountability that I would expect from something like NetUK is the ability for folks to reach out and to work with communities to kind of do that kind of education to say, yes, this does exist. Yes, this is possible. It sounds like a happy little if you describe the cooperation, it sounds like a happy little utopia of industry working together to achieve a common good. That's to most people who study normal economics, that's a foreign concept. And so while it's all very native to the group here, I think it's extraordinarily important to do that. And I think building on that being present and opportunity element that was in the last slides, that being present also means kind of, and I'm saying this somewhat biased because I'm in education, is getting engaged with folks that are hungry to get into this industry but don't necessarily know how. I think it's a step before what Fergus said about ensuring that there is content that is available to beginners. I think it's also, there's an element of reaching out to those beginners, reaching out to education networks, and that could be part of the being present, where some of these smaller events between big yearly events could be things that are hosted at universities that would happily invite experienced network engineers that could help in the education effort. And these universities would also see that as career building. So there's some win-wins there that you can get to achieve some of these opportunity presence and this education about the culture of these communities that make the internet work.
Thank you. Ben?
Hi. To answer Tim's question from before, there are 23 people watching on live right now. Obviously, that seems like a low number compared to the rest in the room, but it's very worth pointing out that people do watch talks years. I spend a small hobby of my time watching old NetUK talks from, way before I was in the industry, and it's fascinating. The point you made earlier about the total value of the room in terms of money spent around people being here, one of the reasons why people why that day rate number that you calculated is even possible is because people go to these events or in the room or in the social circles that allow the internet as a whole to operate. So it's a bit of a misnomer, I think, on the sort of total value room. It's very hard to it's like trying to take a total value of a meeting room. It's a very fun practice, but it's a pretty dangerous number to put. Although it is very funny to obviously avoid people from booking silly meetings. So I forgot the question you were actually asking here, but I got up when you said that because it felt outrageous.
Thank you.
What was the original
Thank
question?
you for the first challenge of the session. I appreciated that as well.
What was the actual question you were looking for? I'll happily answer it.
People who've had to ask their managers for budget to attend today, I wondered what they said is the value that they'd create for themselves, because I think that might point to a North Star for the management committee to figure out how they can grow participation to people who are not here today, which is also one of the questions.
Okay, in that case, that's not me at all, so I'm sorry.
I appreciated your answer, thank you.
I'm definitely too short for this mic. Anyway, in answer to the question of what value I said I would get from this or bring to my company, to my boss, I happen to have a boss who is very much in favour of people attending relevant industry events as part of their personal development. It's not so much seen as being a way to bring value to the company, but bring value to the individual, for their personal development, making relationships within the community. I know that some of my colleagues in my team who have attended UK NOF previously and NetUK going forward do it specifically for the engineering talks because that's their thing, that's their preference. But certainly for me and my reporting chain, it's good to go to these things. It's good to meet people. It's part of your personal development.
There's a really good comment that's come through on the Slack as well. Thank you, Simon, who commented about value. Value gets created simply by growing the community from other people that show up. Because we've got links meetings, LONAP meetings, Nominate meetings, local meetings, wireless community meetings, you've got to come here and see something different. You can't see just the same people and just the same content. Otherwise, we're not creating new value by coming together, which I think is a really, really important and useful piece of feedback as well. Yeah, there's more people at the mic, which is good to see.
Hi, Joan Smart, Endeavour Streaming. Sort of just related to growing the community, especially youth. When I was a student, I ran a conference twice a year, and one of the requirements to sponsor, and I don't think this is a great model for you, but if you were a sponsor, you had to offer an internship to a student. It was a requirement. And what it meant is, as a student attending, anyone I spoke to was potentially an internship. And the only reason I work in the industry I work in is because I interned at a company that I wouldn't have known existed. And I don't think requiring it for this is necessarily a model, but it is an idea.
That's a really interesting idea, the idea that if we do get more students to participate, it's a place where sponsors can meet the people that are most engaged about joining this industry. That's an interesting idea that I actually hadn't heard before from 20 odd years, I think, of coming to these kinds of meetings. That's a really interesting idea, thank you. And linked to one of the questions.
Hi, Rob Barnes from Rolls-Royce. I still feel I need to introduce myself. And this one is around justifying to my boss sort of coming and attending and speaking at the conference. Nuclear is a long game. It's a very long game. You know, the average project is 120 years, something like that. And you know, SMR is pretty racy, but it's still a long game in IT terms. And we're going to have some challenges sort of in about 5 years' time around things like network connectivity that relate to being able to remotely monitor, manage power stations. And part of the value that we're getting from the conference is putting the ideas in people's heads today, because some of the people who are here today could potentially be the people in years to come who will be helping us with that challenge. And that's to get people thinking about it now. I'm also shilling for nuclear, because that's what you do when you work in the nuclear industry. You're always promoting it. And there's also the off chance if anyone's got a data center about 400 megawatts would be quite nice. But yes, trying to steer capability, technological capability for the future to try and arrive at capability at the right time to deliver what we need to deliver.
That was really interesting input as well. Thank you. It's a long game. That's a really interesting perspective, because it's really interesting to hear about a 120-year project life cycle when most of us, well, there's very few organisations from our industry that are 120 years old. So that's a really interesting perspective, and links really neatly to commercial collaboration question. What allows what can NetUK do to become a model for sponsorship in the industry? There was some comments that my deliberately provocative word was inappropriate. Thank you very much, whoever wrote that post-it. I appreciated that. A really interesting idea that came up there was it's important to generate a way for that to be equal access, or at least more access, for smaller and emerging organisations. It's hard to pick a theme from those three. The sample size maybe wasn't quite big enough, but I think one theme that came through, people say, I want to hear from smaller orgs, also bigger orgs. I want to hear from green organisations was one of the pieces of feedback. That led me to think that if I had to grasp for a theme, what I believe there is that there's a category of sponsors that delegates specifically want to hear from, and that might not have been pursued before. We all want to engage regularly with our vendors, and that's obvious, because there are because we need to participate with our vendors, and if we can do that at this event, rather than take separate trips around the country, around the world, we're getting to interact with organisations that we need to, and if they sponsor this event as well, that's incredibly productive for everybody. But there are organisations that are not the big vendors, that are emerging organisations or green organisations, people working in interesting areas that we specifically want to hear from, and that's an opportunity for maybe some specific outreach that I thought was an interesting theme. If I was really looking for a theme in the answers, that's the one that I found. And my question, I think, for this is there an opinion in the room about that? Does that resonate? Does that specifically resonate with anybody? Have you ever thought, I really wish that X, Y, and Z were in the room? Has anyone ever thought about reaching out to them? Are there sponsors that we should be engaging with as a community that we just haven't thought of yet? Is a potentially interesting question. I'm trying to monitor on the Slack as well as in the room. Maybe we can come back to that one if there's time. Who's missing from NetUK today? The students answer has come up a few times in presentations and conversations today, but also a lot of enterprise network, people that use our services. So we as service providers, there are many service providers in the room, but there are also users in the room, and named examples: finance networks, enterprise networks, the media networks, who we have had participate at previous service provider events in our community before. What could we do to make that participation more sticky for those people to come more often? People that don't want to participate at an event where there's lots of alcohol applied, you hear that more and more. Female speakers and people of all genders. Policy. Well, there's just been an election. There's a new minister responsible for telecoms. What does that mean? Wouldn't that have been an interesting perspective to understand at this meeting, and very, very topical? Because that does affect governance and engineering, was the point that the person writing that post-it note made. So who's missing? People speaking that don't look like me. I reflected on that one and thought that as much as I enjoyed asking these questions and processing the answers and engaging with people at the breaks and socials about the questions we asked, the right thing to do would have been to say, no, someone else that's not a getting older white male network operator should run this session, and that's on me for not realising that at the time. There's non-service providers. It would be really interesting to know how we should engage with them. What would we want to say to them if they came to this meeting? What would we ask people that are not service providers is a question I'd love to hear some feedback on from the room. How do we get more policy people to say relevant things to us? And how can we drive different kinds of socials that don't potentially exclude delegates? Here's my question for this section, and James is at the mic.
Yeah, James Bensley. So I was at another NOG discussing the same question with the organisers of the other NOG, specifically about the non-service providers part. So first problem was the name, Network Operators Group. It is instantly exclusionary. So I think it's a good step that we are now called NetUK. I say we. There is a thing called NetUK. I think that's a good thing because straight off the bat, the name is exclusionary to non-operators. So you want policymakers, regulators, standards bodies, vendors, and also the users of service. Every person who's ever done tech support hates customers, but no customers, no job. So it's not just the operators; it's all sides of the coin. So I think a good start is rebranding, renaming. I think a second thing is reword the question. Don't say, how do we get non-service providers here? Because it kind of already creates an us and them barrier, but I know what you're going for. If you instead of saying, how do we approach non-service providers, just get rid of that and just say, how do we approach everybody? Otherwise, there's a kind of an us and them. But I think one of the things is also like where do we market NetUK and how do we market and stuff like this. So for example, the other NOG I was speaking with about how do we get people from fintech to come in and education and all that kind of stuff. Well, that NOG does nothing in those circles. No marketing, no community engagement, nothing. And I've got no answer how to do that. Right? I'm just suggesting. I think that there's a lot of things we could do. Starting with the rebranding, start with how we market, where do we market it. Start moving in different circles and stuff. I think that's a really important thing. Yeah.
Thank you. And I interpret that as a great deal of support for some of the answers on the board, because it would be great for the committee that run the event to be able to take some of this feedback away and actually drive activity off the back of it. So support for what's been presented is really beneficial. So thank you for that. Dinesh.
Hey, Dinesh Babuta. So I think in very simple terms, what we're trying to ask here is, who are we trying to serve? And that's it, really. Who is it we're trying to serve? Because if I look here, most are network operators and engineers, but if NetUK is trying to serve a wider community, what does that community look like? So policy, government, etc. People that are, and I've said this before, people that are affected by network operations and network engineering, and people that are affecting network operations, and engineering. So the bigger question is, who are we trying to serve, and where do we go from here?
Good. That's two people asking questions. It's me that's asking the questions. But I'd invite anybody who's got opinions and comments to answer.
Come out from behind the screen to ask a... Well, just a couple of things. I think the social side of it is also, the networking social side of it is important. And COVID screwed it all up because then we learnt the value of actually coming together and chatting, and you have those random conversations in the coffee breaks, in the hallways, and that's really hard to do online, and we just didn't get the same... we didn't get the same networking. It was just really hard to do. So things like this, where you actually come together and have a chance conversation with somebody in the coffee breaks, is brilliant. That was a really useful conversation. Sometimes actually more useful than the presentations. It's like, I've made a really useful contact, and we can follow up. So yes, that's why I really appreciate things like this for the networking side of it from that point of view. And we are a community, and we're here to look after each other. And people have done that for me in the room in the past, and I'm ever so grateful for what they've done for me personally. Just like, you're looking for work, or you need some help with this, and it's like, yes, I happen to know someone I can introduce you to you need to talk to, because they might be able to help you out. And just that side of it is extremely important. And I think we all learned through COVID, when you take that away. Yes, you can look at the presentations, you can see it all online in the Zoom and everything, but it's just not the same. So you do need to come together every now and then and value that side of it. That's really, really important. And the diversity thing is also very important.
There's commentary on Slack supporting what you're saying right now. Yeah,
we need to work on that. It's not an easy thing to solve. Every kind of conference, everything like this it's not an easy thing to solve. Also, I've really enjoyed the presentations from non-service providers. I enjoyed the police presentation from yesterday, a bunch of stuff I didn't know. And it's like, that's really interesting. What can we learn from them? What can they learn from us? And have the little conversations. And I also really enjoyed the Rolls-Royce nuclear presentation, learning stuff from other industries. And I'd like to see a bit more of that where we can. And years ago I used to work for a process engineering firm, and we built an oil refinery, and we just handed over the keys to the oil refinery a few weeks before, and I turned on the news on my way to work, and the whole site was on fire, the whole oil refinery. It's like, I can't ping it, it's gone down. And actually we learned a lot. When the stakes are higher from nuclear and oil refineries and things like that, when the thing blows up in a massive ball of fire, and we learned a lot. We took a lot from that experience of, alarm management, how the ergonomics of that thing works. So you learn a hell of a lot from other industries.
That went a very different way to what I was expecting.
But the data center hopefully doesn't blow up when we screw up. But yes, you can learn a lot from. I did a presentation of it some while ago, but
creating an environment where people can share. I'm going to call them disaster stories, but maybe we should actually normalise people saying, we're going to not stream, we're not going to record this one, we're going to talk really openly about this mishap. If we can normalise doing that once a meeting, and because that is normal in other industries for people to be quite transparent about mishaps that did occur, rather than as well as safe by design models for building and doing stuff. Maybe if we can create an environment where we can turn the cameras off sometimes and talk about security issues and mishaps and problems, that would be a new thing that we can do. And if we can normalise that,
I actually think we're mostly quite open. We love to exchange the war stories and do presentations on, it all crashed, it broke something, here's what we learned, here's how we fixed it. And there's a lot of, people are surprisingly open here, actually. And working for an IXP, I'm in that special position of people will tell me stuff that they won't necessarily want shared, but yeah, people do get up and do presentations on, you know, oh, all broke, and here's how we fixed it, here's how we learned from it, and here's a presentation so that you can not make the same mistake. But yeah, I think it's all valuable stuff, and yeah, definitely, you know, other industries are not so open because they're all competitors and they don't want to share the embarrassing stories in public. But I think we're a bit more open to that because we want to help each other out and you say, oh, technically we had a disaster, but, you know, and I get a lot from that when someone goes into detail about what actually happened. And some of them are good, not so good. So like Cloudflare, for example, they've had a couple of outages, but it's all on their website. This is what happened. This is how we fixed it. So they're really open about it. And everybody else has learned from that.
Yeah. There's a degree of support on the Slack about creating safe spaces. There's also a degree of comment that it's important to be open, but not about every single security topic, which is something I respect and accept as well. I just want to, in the minutes that I've got left, the question how we should... I asked the question how this organisation, this community will fail spectacularly as a way to find suggestions for things that we don't do or that we actively avoid doing as a community. Making sure that there's community cooperation, sponsor buy-in, keeping up to date with ever-changing environments, not valuing our sponsors would be a really big way to screw up because it would cause us to run out of long-term funding sources. So another North Star, I think, that shone through in that there are two, I think, really important things that came through. An acceptance that the communities need to be specifically tuned to regularly changing environments, which possibly means regularly changing people in those communities and always making sure that we're switched on to what's new and emerging. But also that sustainable funding is essential, and the way that we behave as delegates impacts sustainable funding as well as all the rest of the work that all the rest of the topics that we've come up with today. Does anybody have any comments in the last minute or so on the risks that we should specifically be in tune to and be actively avoiding, particularly from the point of view of sustainable funding, which is critically important, or the need to be connected to change? Are you approaching the mic? Yes.
Hiya, Nat Morris. I think in the next 10 years, I'd love to not see anybody that's led sessions today doing the same thing in 10 years' time. I think succession planning is something that previous organisations haven't lent into and have often dominated boards. So I'd love the future of NetUK to have fixed terms and for people to be rotated out to get fresh blood. And another thing I think is important is often it's always the same suspects volunteering for stuff, and sometimes just standing back and giving others a chance to put themselves forwards, because people often don't want to stand for like a board or stand for like LUNAP if they see someone else is standing, and that's often worrying because they don't want that defeat, and often just giving other people in the community a chance to step forwards and maybe backing them and providing them feedback privately to help push people forwards is important. I just want to see lots of new blood. Great
input. We've run out of time, so I'm going to call it there. And I do want to thank everybody for participating and creating a few important and useful things that the management community can take away. Committee can take away and use. The answers that you provided to the questions, the comments at the microphone today, really, really important. There are some threads on Slack as well that were generated during the talk that I tried to keep on top with as well doing this. So there's a few useful repositories of information. Keep the conversation going because it means that we'll have a NetUK 2, 5, 10, 100 and all get to keep coming together and with all the people that were mentioned today. Thank you so much for participating, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you, Andy. That was really well run, I thought, and I think very useful for all of us. The conversation can also continue on the Slack channel